Hey, welcome to Spirit Squared. I'm Andrew Darington, your host. Tonight, we've got an awesome guest that I've known for 4 to 5 years. She's a badass in bourbon. She has an executive bourbon stewardship. She's a Whiskey Sommelier Level 2. She's the Texas representative in Bourbon Women. She's also the founder of Poorly Educated. My guest tonight is Shannon Hood. Shannon, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. So
Very excited.
yeah, we're going to start with a pour, which we've already made. We're featuring the JT Melnick, which is a rice whiskey.
Yep, out of Louisiana.
It's not distributed to Texas yet.
Not yet. They are looking for distribution early next year, 2024. But right now they have a little bit of a loophole with the store that they are associated with that has a few locations in Texas, so they're able to get a small amount in that way.
Gotcha. We've got a lot of accolades. We've got one here that you've earned. We talked about. Which one is this?
So this is from Whiskey Marketing School down in Austin. This is my Whiskey Sommelier medal, level 2. So when I'm going to be talking about bourbon, I need to be wearing my medal to get all the whiskey superpowers.
Right. Yes. We've got the tough questions coming now.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So you've got a lot in whiskey. Let's talk about your introduction. So what got you started? What got you the fire burning into this process where you were going to put yourself through education and hours of study and testing and all that good stuff?
Well, we have to go way back. I have always been a whiskey drinker. That started very early on with my grandmother, about the age of 5. My grandmother was a single woman. My father was her oldest son, and if we moved, she moved. So she was always around. I spent a lot of evenings with her. And every evening she would pour herself what she called her highball. Mm. In my adult life, I would learn that was just straight Jim Beam in a glass. And, as the grandparents still do, you sip beer or whatever, I would sip apparently straight Jim Beam right along with her.
Right.
High school, college drinking days, all my friends were drinking wine coolers and beer, and I had a glass of Jim Beam and a glass of Coke, and that's
right.
So I've kind of progressed from there.
Was that in this area? Was it in East
Yes,
Texas?
but I grew up in East Texas, born in Marshall, raised Monview, Kilgore.
Right.
So yes.
Okay, so you obviously grew up drinking Jim Beam, Coke. Sounds familiar to some of my friends in North Louisiana. But then it gets serious, a little bit more serious.
Sure.
When did the transition happen?
This wasn't, something that I ever grew up thinking I would have a career in. I grew up, did many other things. We could fast forward to, say, 2011. I went through a divorce. I lived in North Dallas, but I moved back to East Texas. I was in the oil and gas business. It was based here. My family was here. And my stepfather and I would often get together and drink. At this time, I'd changed. We were drinking Jack Daniels.
Oh, stepping up.
But then I took a trip to Ireland and got to visit Jameson Distillery. Mm-hmm. And sometimes on that tour, at the very beginning, they will pick out a few people and hand you a scroll. And they tell you will find out what the scroll means at the end of the tour. And what it means is you will be someone selected to come up and blindly taste the best-selling Scotch, the best-selling Irish, the best-selling American, which were Johnny Walker, Jameson, and Jack Daniels.
Really?
And then, kind of slide forward your favorites. Well, I didn't have a lot of experience with Jameson, but that day I really liked the taste. So that's the one I learned.
Salt water, the salt air.
My mom was in the background. We're in Ireland, texting my stepfather back in the U.S. Shannon's a trader. She picked Jameson over the Jack Daniels.
Right.
But from there, that sparked, hey, you know, this world of whiskey is very vast and wide, and why don't I start exploring, find out what I like and don't like. And fast forward 2018, I was sitting around my house. I'd asked some friends, hey, what if I start like a whiskey club? Wouldn't it be cool to get together and just try different things? Everybody was kind of like, if you do it, Shannon, we'll come. Opened up Facebook. Facebook Big Brother was watching, and I saw the very first post of East Texas Bourbon Society, and I was like, how do I not know about this?
Right.
Contacted them. I didn't know about it because it had just started, and they were very grateful for me to jump on board, and that's how East Texas Bourbon Society came to be, and that has really just kind of skyrocketed my learning through meeting and bringing in different distilleries, different companies, and making contacts, just kind of realizing how much I love to drink it. I love to talk about it just as much. And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've been on a multitude of barrel picks. I even requested you in some, like, hey, if I go pursue this distillery and get these samples, there's going to be a female there because I respect your palate, you and some others that are in our group. And there's been a number of times where you said things or you've tasted things that others haven't. So I respect that your experience and expertise in that.
And that kind of genetically, and if you can't get mad at anybody, but
Sure.
whoever you think the maker is, you know, but genetically, women do have more sense of taste and smell, and that really comes from because we are the ones caring for our young who can't, you know, feed and take care of themselves, and so we're always aware of, oh, this might not be good. So that genetically, women just seem to have more taste receptors, taste buds that can pick up and detect different things. It's not true for every female.
Right. And the times that I've had females in the barrel picks, they're very vocal about what they are tasting, where with others I've felt like there's been some suppression because they would be judged, or that flavor profile would be, you know, talked about, or it could be shunned out of other opportunities.
They said that.
Correct, yes. Or that's not a popular belief or what have you.
Comes down to, you know, in tasting, there are no wrong answers, and people will get hung up on that. Like,
Sure.
you know, hey, if you don't want to seem dumb, you can always shout out vanilla and caramel if you're on a bourbon pick, because those need to be present in there.
And everybody knows that mine is don't say bananas. Do not say bananas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there, you said you started getting into Irish whiskeys. Were there any distilleries that stood out to you when you first embarked on your journey with East Texas Bourbon Society, or prior to that? Were there any, you know, favorites or ones that just were like, aha, okay, I'm into, similar to how some folks get intrigued with craft distilleries. They start tasting different flavors, different profiles, same lane, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of when I started that journey with East Texas Bourbon Society, I really hadn't been on that many whiskey distillery tours. Yes, all across Ireland, but that was an exploration, and every county has its own, signature whiskey. So that was more of just exploration and drinking. Prior to that, I'd had a big interest in wine, so I'd been to plenty of wineries.
Right. But you weren't going to, Specs or to a goody and saying, hey, I want to try this, or hey, I've heard this is good. You didn't have that type of foundation.
No, I didn't have that type of foundation. That came through the club, actually.
Okay.
But early in that, I did make a week-long trip to Kentucky.
Okay.
Knocked out a few of the big distilleries. Found a few small craft distilleries. The craft trail was very small. It had started in 2018, but it was pretty small. Now there's a tons more. But exploring different Texas distilleries, we've
got some great.
We've kind of got a sister product here.
Yeah.
But
we've got some great ones in our backyard.
Yes, absolutely.
Rust in that fashion.
And the Texas Whiskey Trail is just in the few years, 4, 5 tops that it has been in existence, it has grown exponentially. I think now there are 30 plus distilleries on the Texas Whiskey Trail, because Texas is so big. Unlike Kentucky, you can't spend a week and hammer out quite a few.
Right.
You have to drive so far.
Yeah, our state's big.
It's broken up. You have kind of the North Texas, which would cover like Denison, Iron Room, down to Toacaro and Palestine and Belconis and Waco. Then you have like Austin and the Hill Country, Gulf Coast, South Texas. Brand new distillery out west, close to Lubbock, has just joined the trail. So we're moving out west. There is a distillery at Big Spring. They're not a part of the trail yet, but
I'm sure join pretty.
Yeah. So it's super exciting because Texas whiskey is really its own whole genres.
Just the way to age it.
It's all bourbon.
Right.
Texas. Some are doing bourbon. Some are doing single malt. Some are doing wheat whiskey. Some are playing with heirloom corns and grains. So everybody is.
And we got the Cajuns flaming rice.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. Yep. So any distilleries that stand out in Texas, or really anywhere that you like, hey, this is one that kind of goes under the radar, that maybe not necessarily for the tour, but maybe for the juice?
Sure. No, I won't say that they're necessarily under the radar anymore, but definitely Iron Root up at Denison.
Very, very good.
Vanilla products, everything they do is great. Experimenting.
Chipak. Yes.
That I was going to say sitting on gin and juice, but that's too
Right.
Yes, they're definitely not flying under the radar anymore. Like 2020 when they won World's Best Bourbon, that really solidified them and put them on the map. Another smaller Texas one in Forney, Lone Elk.
Oh man, other stuff.
Wheat whiskey. I love its whole intention on why it was going to be wheat whiskey and not corn.
Right.
Very small, but actually this year named best wheat whiskey in the world. So they kicked Bernheim out of its spot that it had clinched for year after year.
I recently had Bernheim's most recent release, and I can see how Lone Elm could be thrown down.
Yeah.
And we did a pretty exclusive barrel pick there. Picked 2 small barrels, and they were fantastic. I mean, really, really good stuff.
And that's the kind of thing I like showcasing about single barrels, because those 2 barrels, I mean, they were born like a day apart.
Right.
They aged the exact same amount of time. We got almost the exact same amount of bottles out of them. They were like 0.2 off on their proof,
Yeah.
but they aged completely different.
Right.
In
One color. What was it?
Tastes completely different.
Yeah.
I love showing things like that, show how single barrels are so unique. And I think, people are often, where can I find this allocated bourbon, or where can I find this allocated bourbon? Well, while you're looking, why don't you pick up a few of these single barrels stores that you stop in on, and those are rarer than that bottle that you were looking for, because when those are gone,
right,
they're gone.
Yeah, and in the big distilleries, I mean, there's a master distiller, yes, there's oversight, but it's made in such a large capacity versus your boutique distilleries or even your smaller to large distilleries. They're handcrafted, daily tested barrels. It's just a different ball of wax, whether it's in Kentucky, Texas, Louisiana, Nevada, wherever it's being made, Wyoming. They're more hands-on.
Sure.
And that doesn't mean that the quality's any different, or in some cases it does mean the quality's different, but it just means that just because it's inaccessible or it's accessible doesn't mean that it's even worse. In a lot of cases, it's better.
Yeah.
And if people grew to like some of those, they'd find themselves happier about going into a liquor store.
Yeah.
Right? They don't have to necessarily buy from Dave behind the counter for 10 years before they get their first antique or whatever. Memories in whiskey in general, because it's been about the same amount of time, maybe like 2018, 2019, probably 2018, I started getting more and more interested in diving into other things, because I've done rum, vodka, gin, I've done Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, a lot of Jack Daniels, more than I care to share.
Yeah.
But and I started tasting a couple different things, and one of the first things that I tasted was Jack Daniel's Sinatra, which is a fantastic pour for people that have never tried it. I mean, it's really up there. And so that kind of got me thinking, okay, well, what else is out there? So that was my journey, was, okay, well, what else could taste as good as that? It wasn't on my radar at that time. But one of my favorite memories, it was during COVID, and we had a barrel pick, and they sent us samples, or they sent me samples. I happened to have a good relationship with the distillery, and contacted them. They send samples, and so we're under COVID protocol, and so you can't meet in large spaces, or you can't meet in small spaces with a lot of people. You can't be around people. You got to wear masks here. You got to. And so we decided to meet up in a mezzanine of an office building. And I remember we huddled up the chairs, and then, so we were built a little fortress, like a fort, like you would when you were a kid. And we had one table in there, and our knees were right up against the table. All of us and there were people passing, looking to see what we were doing. And I think there was 6 of us. You were one of them, and it was so fun. That was one of my favorite picks that we did. It turned out fantastic.
The Joker.
That was the Joker figure. Yeah. And I know everybody that was on that pick, because I picked almost everybody on that pick, and I had the barrel personally. It was one of my first barrels that I was able to coordinate and help a club get, and so it meant a lot to me to do that. All right. So let's change topics. Let's get a little more geekish.
The reason we're in the metal.
Yeah, exactly. Getting back to the metal so I've been on a litany of distillery tours. I know a lot of the folks watching have as well. If you go into the detailed tours, this isn't glossing over and, hey, look at that a ways away from there. When you get up to a still and you're able to talk about how it works and this, that, and the other, a couple of the reference words that are talked about is heads, hearts, and tails. And so they're mentioned, but they're somewhat glossed over. So it's just kind of assumed that that, well, we don't really keep much of the head. we keep all the heart and we dispose of the tail. Can you go into a little more detail about how that works? Because since you have the middle.
Yeah. So when you are in the distillation process, distillation doesn't make alcohol. You've made the alcohol in the fermentation. Here in distillation, we're just trying to concentrate that alcohol. And there's not just one kind of alcohol. There's many different kinds of alcohol that are in there, and you want to separate those because some are deadly. Some just smell rotten and don't produce nice congeners or flavors. So you want to separate those. And all of these alcohols, they have different boiling points.
Right.
So it's not like when you're distilling that when you talk about heads, hearts, and tails, those aren't really just coming off very nicely in that order. Some of them have very similar boiling points and they're coming off very close to each other. Alcohols that make up the heads, which sometimes you might hear that called foreshots or heads, include things like acetone, fingernail polish from vinegar, acetaldehyde, which is the alcohol that gives you really bad hangovers. So if you're drinking really cheap rock gut whiskey, it has a lot of that particular head left in the final product.
Right.
The main one you want to get off is methanol. Make you go blind, kill you. So stories of moonshiners in the woods going blind.
Right.
It's because they were not letting those first alcohols come off and discard them. In today's day and age, distillers have different ways of figuring out where they are in the alcohol run. It's definitely those alcohols have smells and odors. Some go that way. Some go by how clear the spirit coming off is. As you're in the hearts, you won't have any cloudiness at all. Cloudiness comes from the tail end. Proof, as your product is coming off, you're checking the proof of it. You can tell where to make those cuts there.
Right.
What we're looking for is actually ethanol, and that's considered the heart.
Mm.
You collect all of that. Generally, the heads will come off and goes into your spirits tank is usually divided up into 3 sections.
Right.
Everything coming off first, you're putting in that first tank. Once you realize, hey, here we are, here's you move it over. And
Shine is clear now.
Different part of the tank.
Yes.
As you start to come out of there, you move into the tails. Now, some people don't immediately cut that off. There are some tails that produce some nice oiliness, so some different congeners that we might want in our spirits. Some distilleries will take those heads and tails, combine them together, and re-distill them to try to pull a little more of the hearts out. But then generally they're just discarded. They make a great cleaner. Yeah.
I did read that there's some distillers or mezcal, some scotches that use some of the head to give some smokiness.
Those heads you can keep like for blending. That they're not all bad, but there are definitely levels of some of those that you don't want.
Gotcha.
All.
So cloudiness, clearness, and then is there an element of specific gravity where maybe there's certain gases that are heavier than others?
Well, we're talking about boiling points.
Gotcha. So just purely vapor.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because it's boiling off. All of those have a lower boiling point than water. So the water is staying in the still, or you're using steam to heat it up. The vapor is rising through the still and it reaches a condenser. The condenser has cool water circulating, so you turn that vapor back into a liquid and collect it.
Yeah, you're playing chemist.
Yeah. It's just chemistry.
So let's get into sommelier. Being a whiskey sommelier, there's 4 levels. You've accomplished level 2.
2.
Let's talk about 1 first.
Okay.
So, because it's a rigorous program.
It is. You go and spend about 3 days at this location. You're on campus, and from 8 to 6 every day you are in class. So, also along with the whiskey sommelier training, you're also getting. It's a very good marketing school. So I do not have a marketing degree, so some of that is very valuable information for me to take into the spirits world with that marketing understanding. So level 1, because this sommelier program is whiskey sommelier, it is not bourbon focused. So we have to essentially learn about 5 major categories of whiskey: being Scotch, Irish, American, Canadian, and Japanese. So level 1 is kind of a deep dive into all of those. And so
history.
You have some reading history. You're
not drinking all day is what the point. It's like
No, we are a lot. A lot of it.
Right? Yeah, somewhat.
Yes, definitely a lot of history. And in that, learning to know, smell, and taste, and be able to pick out your wider category, like, oh, this is Scotch. Here are my markers for knowing how when I pick something up and smell it, I can easily identify it as a single malt or a Scotch. This is Irish. This is American bourbon. This is rye.
Right.
Once you get into that, rye becomes hard to tell if it's American rye or Canadian rye.
Right.
A lot of the good Canadian stuff we don't get here, so we just assume all Canadian whiskey is kind of trash whiskey, but there are good Canadian whiskey.
It's backed up, right? Where you got blends, you got Caribou Crossing. It's the backup blends, right?
Level 2 is the American deep dive. So me being, a lover of bourbon, that's kind of been my favorite level so far. Level 3 will be Scotch and Irish deep dive.
So when that starts?
Scotch, I'm doing level 3 in November.
In November, okay. And how long does the program last?
So it'll just be 3 days there.
3 days there?
Yeah.
Okay. And then they test you at the end?
Yes, yeah.
I got you.
And then if I pass, my medal stays the same this
Sure. Oh, very similar to graduation or what have you in high school or in college.
And then the other one, this is Executive Bourbon Steward,
Yes.
which is State and Think Society. They are Louisville, Kentucky based, associated with Moonshine University. They teach 2 levels, and it is all bourbon focus.
Okay. So your main love is bourbon, right?
Yeah.
What is it about bourbon that edges ahead of the whiskey or rye? For you, is it the sweetness?
It is the sweetness.
Okay.
I love, especially when it comes across as that dark brown, almost burnt top of a creme brulee, deep, dark sweetness is really what I love about bourbon.
Right. Is there a distillery? I know you don't. I know you love iron, so I know that. Yeah. But is there a distillery that you're like, okay, this is if you have a litany of bottles, which I know you do, because I've seen selfies and stuff like that. But I mean, is there a bottle that you're grabbing first, or maybe the one that I know one for me, when I'm introducing someone who's maybe making the transition between Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, I'm grabbing Eagle Rare, because that's a good, it's a nice bourbon, 90 proof. It's not going to burn their palate. They're going to taste a lot of caramel in it. But for someone who's maybe dove into it, I think they know a pretty good bit, what's a bottle that you're grabbing, or maybe a distillery that you look to that's going to maybe set a bar?
So a distillery I used to work for, I spent a couple of years working for, Tawakero. Their blended product on the shelves is spectacular, but their single barrels are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Never had a bad one the whole time I worked there. And I love pulling those out, especially because I had access, to barrels. I have,
Bring the canteen.
half full bottles of, siphoned off. But I really love showing people that product, especially people new to Texas whiskey. I'm also pretty partial to the Still Austin barrel pick that we did.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
Yeah, it is.
Super proud of the amount of time that Yvonne and I spent within years handling them. And
I think I remember both of you riding a big barrel, I think a 200 and something gallon barrel. Did they have like a police barrel there? You remember that when we did the field trip?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and they let us ride the barrel. And we were like, look, we need to be first on the list. We were all lobbying for it. It was, you guys did the pick when we were moving into our house. So, but I'm glad that you guys got to do it, because it was an all-female pit crew, and y'all had a great time. It was really a very pleasant, Still Austin pick. After I had tasted a couple others, that gave me a little doubt. So that was really cool. So that leads us into a really, I think, an interesting part of this podcast, where we talk a little bit. You said that that 2018, right? You got pretty interested. You're going up to Kentucky. Things are a little different when it comes to females going to a distillery. I know that certain bartenders are maybe looking, I know at my wife or at maybe people that I'm with, and there's a lot of doubt about their abilities or what they can. They're thinking they're just going to get a Mai Tai or something like that. Were there any times where in 2018, 2019, when you start deep diving in, you start getting really interested, where somebody's like, shouldn't do this, or maybe you're not, maybe doubted some capabilities?
So that,
you don't have to be specific.
No,
I'll let you be.
So that 2018 trip, my first bourbon trail trip, it was a very good friend of mine. She had, and at the time she did still work for a distributor. So we had some good connections, some good ends. We got some pretty phenomenal tour things for, somebody who's just learning about bourbon. But I will tell you that every bar we went to on that trip, and just to engage the bartenders, because first of all, we were like, I mean, you're a hole-in-the-wall dive bar in Kentucky, but your back bar, the bottles you have on that shelf, we've never seen half of those. Talk to me. And man, they just loved to engage. I think they found it maybe a little different than someone just say, give me a beer, give me a cocktail, and
I remember you.
Yeah,
kind of guy.
That hey, you've got knowledge. You're sitting there serving this and pouring this. You live in this state, Tell me. And there's also like then coming back home. Let's go to a bar and order something neat, or sometimes unbarred at my order is Jameson on the rocks. It's going to be cheap. I can let my ice melt and just have that add to it. And, maybe getting a comment from the bartender like, oh, hey, yeah, but never really like any
Super
looking down on. And then, of course, if you'll just sit and talk to me for 5 minutes, you'll become aware that I do have a lot of knowledge about whiskey, and that so if there was ever any doubt, there ceases to be some doubt.
Right. So in the past, I would say close to 3 years, especially in East Texas, and it may be different in other places, we have seen a big surge in women influencers in the whiskey world, women distillers, women owners of business. I've had them part of more of my barrel picks. We've already talked about that. They're more knowledgeable, more involved in groups, in picks. Why are we seeing this surge of women?
Women have been in the industry since the beginning of time. We were the first distillers. The men, we were hunter-gatherers. The men were out hunting and gathering. The women were
Cooking.
Taking care of the camp.
Yep.
So it should always come as no surprise that women have always been there. I mean, even if you go back to, Irish and Scottish history, it was women running those distilleries. Again, the men were out, fighting wars and handling the crops and the hard labor work. Settlers in America, a lot of early, I think the first actually sour mash written recipe is attributed to a woman in Kentucky in 1818. She'd been married twice. She had 12 kids, widowed for the second time. She was the one manning the distillery because the last husband had just passed away. So we've always been there and always had our hands in it. The women have always worked in distilleries. So it's nothing new. I think with you had Marianne Eves, the living Nate, I think it was Stone 28.
Sounds about right. 2018 or 2019.
Yeah. She has at that point already been named Kentucky's first female master distiller. And then I think from there, it seemed to be a trend for largest distilleries to pull in and have a female. I know Old Forester brought in and Jackie Zykan, phenomenal blender. She came from a bartender background, so I'd obviously been around spirits for quite a few years. I don't think that puts them down in any way, that they didn't deserve those positions.
Oh, no.
Honestly, in the industry, I've never had any pushback about being female. Really, the only pushback I've ever had is from the consumer, just the public who doesn't work in that industry in any way, that just enjoys the spirit. You have some people who think they know a lot, and just because they have a lot of money and then can buy certain bottles that they know all, and I just don't let those people bother me, because I know otherwise. I don't mean them to hold me up in high regards.
And I think the clubs that we have in East Texas do a great job of really making sure that anybody, but especially those that could be timid walking in, are greeted with warmness, and they're encouraged to talk about things, and there's never a doubt that anyone's being judged about anything they say or do, and they're encouraged to come back or participate whatever club you're talking about. Whether you're liking their social media post, which encourages them to do more of, or if you're talking about a meeting, and it just then they form bonds with especially other females that are kind of doing the same thing, and next thing you know, you're going on trips. And then you're picking barrels together, and you're making an impact on the area that I haven't seen in other areas. So kudos to our area for that type of receptiveness. Before we get to our next topic, I'm going to pour this one here, which is kind of a bottle that I know is special to Shannon. I'll just say his name is Jason. Gave me this bottle. It just happened to be one of his first off of his run, and we both tasted this bottle before. I got gifted this after he realized how much I liked it.
Look at that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It'll be a mystery, or should we tell him? I don't know.
I think it.
It's Accent Oak. It's one of his first runs. Jason Jackson, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Yes, cheers.
Hey.
I don't know if I can talk after that.
Yes.
That is fantastic. All right. Let's talk about Poorly Educated.
Yeah. So Poorly Educated came about, Tabacera, who I told you I've been working for, as distilleries sometimes do, kind of went through a period of just downtime. They needed some investment income. I need to get paid for a living. So we had to part ways. And a way at that time, a way for me to continue to travel and talk about whiskey, I just decided to start my own company, Poorly Educated, where I host private events or public classes, just exploring flights, and usually each class has a particular theme. We're either studying a particular distillery or finishing, but just a way for me to stay involved. Now I wasn't working for one distillery, so I could really approach all distilleries and kind of form relationships with them all, and be able to bring in all their products, either showcase them somehow or try not to be known as a tasting girl. I don't want to get
more of a head planner.
Yes. I like to showcase things in a way that's not just me standing in a liquor store where I get your attention for just a few moments. I want to spend some time with you, because to me, whiskey and bourbon is the community, I call them the family that I have found in this group, is very strong. Everybody really seems to care about one another. They want to sit down. They want to share a bottle. It makes you share stories. And really kind of form bonds with people that otherwise you might not have gotten a chance to.
Right.
Lost all train of thought there.
No, I mean, we share a common thread. I mean, I love talking to the reps, the distillers, the distributors, the people that kind of go unnoticed, because you go into a store. I enjoy talking to the distillers, the distributors, the people behind the scenes, the people that don't necessarily get the credit. I love to talk to them, because they're very earnest people. They're very honest people, where there's some deception in some of the stores, can be, and they're very good at what they do. And they're very passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
And I like that part. There's others that really like the I should say the glamorous part, the fun part of the parties, the get-togethers. And don't get me wrong, I like doing that. But I find myself geeking out whenever I do go to those parties. I start talking about what this thing is made out of and all that good stuff. And I kind of have to be toned down a bit because I start talking in that fashion because I want them to know the backstory on the guy that I met that dropped off the grain while I was there.
Right.
And talked to me for 20 minutes about, his cattle or horses or, his grain elevator or whatever. It's interesting to me how we get there. How does it get in my bottle? Yeah. And then there's others that thrive on the bottle to the consumer, and that's not my forte.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the hands-on, like how many people did it take, to make this product? Sure.
And a lot of people, when you're doing sampling, I've done samples with you. Downtown Tyler, we did a big one. And it's fun doing that part too, because you start to see people enjoying it and you can kind of add on to their enjoyment by telling them tidbits about the manufacturing process and the sewing process and things you saw that maybe they haven't seen or what have you, or maybe, someone who's tied to that they may know or what have you. It's fun. That part's fun, but I prefer the backstory, like you said, sitting down and having a glass and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. You get to talk to people and find out their decisions, their managerial decisions, why did you do this way, or choose this route?
Right. All right. A lot of people, distillers, a lot of distribution folks. Is there anybody that stands out that you want to give a shout out to? Somebody who's done something maybe recently or in the past that either influenced you, impacted you, or maybe recently impacted a larger group, somebody who deserves some cred. It could be a group, it could be a person.
Well, I generally love everybody I've met in my whiskey journey, generally. The Jackson family, Jason and Justin and Lisa, I pestered them for, I think, a good solid year for a job, just saying, hey, and I had a full-time job, but it allowed me to be wherever I wanted to be.
Sure.
So I remember the day when they finally said, hey, we'd like to bring you on. And that was a big deal. I mean, I was the only person working there that was not immediate, say, a family member. So shout out to them for bringing me on and
right,
getting me hooked on, working, making money in the industry. I would also love to give a shout out to Marianne Eames. I had watched the movie Neat, knew who she was following her. She had, this would be middle of pandemic, so summer of 2020.
Right.
She had left Castle and Key. She was traveling around Blendy. She married a man who had a traveling circus, so you spend your life on the road. And saw they were traveling through Texas. So I just sent an Instagram message. I would love for you to stop by this Texas distillery and blah, blah, blah. And less than 12 hours later, I got a message back. I would love to. And I freaked out.
Right.
So
you geeked out.
I did. I just thought, what are we going to do? And so she got to stop by, talk with Caro and Jason. It was actually Justin and I got to just let her taste through barrels. It was, fun to hear her say how much she loves the spirit we were making. She shared some things with us that actually I had to remind Justin So she just released a product called Forbidden Bourbon, and she disclosed the mash bill. And I had to remind Justin that, do you remember when 2020, she let us taste that white corn, white wheat, high malted barley, year and a half old sample that is now at its age now being released by her. So that was really cool. And it's, very cool to say that I can call her my friend, someone who is looked up to so much in the industry, and someone who I've seen put up with a lot by being a woman in this industry. And really who she's putting up with that from is that same consumer group that I told you that's the only pushback I've ever gotten from being a woman in this industry.
Right.
We've both talked about her tonight, Melissa Starr. I met her through someone say whiskey. She's now doing lots of big things, some charity bottles with Mary.
Yeah, Stars.
Yeah, and Stars.
Yeah, I did them a shout out last week. I was one of their shirts.
Yeah. Just a strong woman figure. So it's nice to have those kind of women, on your side that will always be there for you. Of course, most of the men I've met in this industry, I could probably say would have my back as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks so much for coming on.
It's been fun.
I had a great night. Yeah, it was very fun. We got some laughs, got to talk about some cool stuff, and got to regular metal. Being heavier than the night.
Flame by flame.
Yeah, right. You got any clock around it. Yeah. I had
one when they got that. I came out going flame by flame.
Did you take any pictures biting?
No,
you should. Yeah, biting. That'd have been awesome. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much for coming on. Yeah. I appreciate it. It was really fun. So Spirit Squared, next podcast, we're going to have a organ donation transplant specialist. So we're going to switch gears.
Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. We are going to have some spirits, so don't worry about that. But we've got a guy coming on. He's an expert in that field, and we're going to dive deep into that. Should be very interesting. Look forward to you tuning in. Thanks.